Hi, this is Susan Diol, and you are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast, everyone. I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
And I'm Matt Dale.
And today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 14 of Quantum Leap, S.O.S. And not only that, we're doing so in a special crossover event with the Quantum Leap Aftershow. Everybody, please welcome to the show special guests Albert Burdge, Hayden McQueenie, and Serenity Burdge. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us. I can't believe you let me back on the show, but your funeral.
It's great to have you guys on at last.
Thank you for having us on the crossover event of the century. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited.
Hell yeah.
I love your guys' show. I love what you're doing. And thank you for having us on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have the creator of the Quantum Leap podcast back in our, it's the august return of Albert Burdge to the Quantum Leap podcast. So most people who are listening, who are new to the show, might know you better now because I was able to play that Oh Boy interview that you and I did about a year ago discussing the genesis of the podcast and our long friendship. So I'm always thrilled to talk to you, Albie. Everybody knows that they're going to ship us like they used to ship me and Skip. So
I'll take it. I need it.
Yeah. And if this love fest wasn't enough for all of you out there listening, we will also be bringing you an interview with Brandon Routh, who played Addison's dad in this episode. I just know him as X.O. Augustine. They never said his first name on screen.
It was Gossip
What
Girl
was it?
XO.
Alexander. Alexander Albert Augustine, I believe.
Alexander Albert Augustine.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, yeah. So, I mean, we got Superman on the Quantum Leap podcast. That's a get. And we had a great time talking to him. So Brandon was terrific. And you will be hearing that interview after the break. So everybody stay tuned for that. So, yeah, fun times here on the QLP. But before we go any further, you may be wondering where Allison is. After last week's recording, Allison asked that she step away from the podcast, and she put an announcement on Twitter to that effect, and she said that it would be fine if I read that aloud to everybody listening. So Allison writes, I have nothing positive or constructive to say at this point, so I've removed myself from further EPs covering the new show. It sucks because I used to really look forward to talking to my friends about this franchise, but it's just not fun to record or listen to right now. I'll still be in pods covering the classic series. Chris, Matt, Albie, Hayden, and everyone else will continue covering the new show and conducting awesome interviews. They're doing good stuff and are worth supporting. So I respect Allison's choice. I am so utterly bummed. You have no idea. It doesn't feel like the show without her. Me, Matt, and Allison have been sort of going at this now for how many years? Doing the original show and the new show, and
not even just the show. I mean, just getting the chance to catch up with Chris and Allison every week. It's been like a regular part of my social life for the last few years. So. I'm glad it's only going to be 5 weeks to see us through to the end of the season, but I'm going to miss her. But we got some good plans coming up to see us through.
Yeah, so everybody stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about that more at the end of the show, how we plan to move forward. But Allison will be back, and I believe it will be for a book show. I think the next thing we're doing for the classic series is Pulitzer.
So,
one of the best
everybody
ones.
Start reading Pulitzer for the auspicious return of Allison Pregler to the Quantum Leap podcast. So, Allison, we're going to miss you, but we look forward to having you back. And, of course, Allison is welcome to come back anytime if she feels like beforehand. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Anyway, here we are. We have episode 14, S.O.S., and it's the second in a run of 6 in a row that are going to take us to the season finale. Let's get some first impressions. We'll start with you, Matt. What'd you think of S.O.S.?
Oh man, I'm gonna sound like I'm fawning. I'm gonna sound like I'm sycophantic. But I watched this a couple of times today, and I could not find anything to critique about it. Which is not to say it's necessarily my favorite episode. I think there's been some episodes so far in this run that have done some brave things and have occasionally failed. This is just a quality episode from start to finish. Really strong. I was very happy with it.
How about you, Albie?
I enjoyed this episode. I wasn't really looking forward to it as much because I'm not like a war movie kind of guy. I'm not into the military. I'm more pacifist. But anything Quantum Leap, I'm on board for. And by the end of this episode, I was like, I just loved it. I messaged the writer of the episode and I told him how much I enjoyed it. And it was really good to see the father-daughter stuff. That's another reason why we have Serenity on here, because this was a really good father-daughter episode. And when there's father-daughter writing in a show that I care about, it really affects me because, you know, it's not difficult to see myself in those positions. But overall, an amazing episode and a great addition. And then the Leaper X stuff. Oh my goodness. That was great.
Yeah. We'll be talking about that. And we've heard from the father. Let's hear from the daughter. Rennie, what did you think of this episode?
This episode for me, like, was kind of like in between the episodes. It wasn't bad, but it's not my favorite. But it definitely is a really good episode. And same with the Leaper X. Like, I did not expect Leaper X to show up, but altogether, it was a really good episode, and I liked it.
Cool. And Hayden McQueenie, give us your take. What's the hot take from Down Under?
Serenity, first of all, you're very lucky that you hadn't seen any of the promo pics or anything like that, which came out, because we all knew that Leaper X was coming because we'd seen him in some pictures. But it's nice hearing the fact that, you know, it was completely unexpected to someone who didn't already know it was going to happen. I actually think this is the best episode they've done so far. And what I liked best about it is it flowed how I thought they would with this actual series, having a good chunk of it at the project. Seeing how everything that they're doing in the Leap, they're then going and doing some research on in the project. And then they get an answer, they immediately go and tell Ben. And then, seeing how everything progressed that way, instead of having essentially a side mission that they've got to do. Not that I dislike the side mission of the mystery box or whatever it is you're calling it. I actually really enjoy that part of it too, more so than others. But I did like how they went about it in this episode. It was more fast-paced, and it was, I think, a better fit for Quantum Leap. I think that people who have had negative things to say about the show would probably find this episode a much better fit.
Yeah, I have to tell you, the Leap and Project Synergy was completely on point in this episode, like it hasn't been on the series so far. And I think that this is, to your point, Hayden, what everybody was hoping, or at least envisioning, for having the project being part of the show. And not only that, they had it in such a way that they were cutting it together where you would have Addison giving part of an explanation and then cut back to the project where they're having a separate conversation. So it never lagged. It never said it never played like a game of telephone on screen, you know? And I know that this is something that Allison had wanted to see more of on the show, and me as well. And for the first time, it almost for the first time felt like we were watching the same show, not two separate shows. I think that they've done it to varying success in previous episodes, but I think in this episode, they really found a way to complement both stories and have them be part of a greater whole that was a much more satisfying viewing experience.
And that project stuff that gave us that synergy, it also gave us some of the best material we've had for Magic so far that hasn't involved him just being the father figure who just says some wise things and says, "Don't worry, Addison, it's okay to feel emotion." He was actually going out there and having his own stuff to do, which was really cool to see, because Ernie's been underused to an extent.
Echoing what you guys said, I really love that scene with Magic and his Chinese counterpoint at the time, and how it went from the information of the minefield from Magic to Jen, and from Jen to Addison, and from Addison to Ben, and they were just able to boom, 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 boom. And I loved it, just like you guys were saying, and I want to see more of that. Like teamwork, but real time teamwork and not how they did it previously.
Another benefit of that was everybody seemed to have something to do with this episode. Right. It's not like we're back at the project spinning our wheels and talking around the Leaper X stuff and talking around the mystery box. Everybody actually seemed to have a job, which was a little bit different than we had in the past. I mean, one thing that I did notice, I finally see more of what Jen is there for, because, and we've discussed this on previous episodes, with sort of the weird separation between Ian and Jen. Do we really need both of them? And it seems to me that they were a little bit more clearly defined. Apparently, Ian is all about Ziggy and probability matrices and predicting what Ben needs to do, while Jen seems to be more of a recon and intelligence officer in this one. I know that she's technically the head of security in the project, but I think that she had a unique enough role to play in this one to actually justify her place on the floor of the control room.
Problem is, we go too far down that route, and then if Ziggy can ever start to speak, Ian becomes redundant. So we need to keep Ziggy, as painful as that is, we need to keep Ziggy running slow and not actually doing anything.
Do not say that to Deborah.
I know.
Well, Ian, I think, had the least to do in this episode, but I actually didn't mind it, because what Ian did bring was valuable. And I know that we love getting into topics of the law. Ian seemed to imply that it would have to be a really big change that Ben does in order to make big changes at the project. So I thought that was a really good line to put in there, and that means that, yeah, Ben might be able to help repair, or at least not estrange Addison with her father, but she's still going to be there, and she's still going to essentially be the same person doing the same role. So I thought that was a good line for Ian to have.
Jen's role in this episode, I really enjoyed. Like you were saying, she has something more to do in this episode, and it was separated between Ian and Jen, and I'm always on board for more Jen. I think I started the hashtag more Jen.
Hashtag Team Jen.
Yeah, Team Jen. So, and we're going to get more in the next episode, but I really enjoyed how they all worked together.
So I kind of have a theory. I don't know if this matches up at all, but what we learned about from magic, knowing that Sam leaped into magic, knowing that in the future, I'm thinking that if Addison's father comes back, it would kind of be the role as Sam's brother in some way. And maybe Rossi would come back later on in the series and say hey, I've been seeing this person in my dreams. That could be something in the future.
Yeah. Who knows where Tom is at this point? 1989. I think he would probably be a career Navy man. So perhaps he knows Rossi, being a SEAL still. We've also talked about the fact that they were talking about changes in Addison's timeline and the pithy Back to the Future references in the top of the show, which, we're all about the Back to the Future references. It's been a couple of years since I played a Biff drop on this one. I think I'll put one in this show, but the fact that we have this reveal of Addison's father and the relationship that they share and the issues that they've had, this is probably the most significant development of Addison's character that we've seen since episode 1. And I wanted to get some takes on that. What did you guys feel about filling in some of her backstory?
So, all right, in two minds here. We already know a lot about Addison's personality, and there was some really good stuff here showing where that came from. She is very, very stoic, very. Some people have said unemotional, but not unemotional. I think just very, very stern, but letting the emotions through from time to time. And this episode definitely explained a lot of that, and I think explained that in a very satisfactory way. It is a little unfortunate, I think, that they've probably gone overboard in previous weeks, showing Addison quite often being upset about something. They do give Caitlin a lot of crying acting in this show, and I think if they'd have held some of that back a little bit, it would have been a bit more of a punch for this episode. But yeah, it was great to see. It was great to see some background for her. We want more background for all of the characters. I think we've seen a bit of Ben now, but we're at a point in the season now where we can start filling in the gaps for other characters.
How about you, Hayden?
Well, I thought it was good. I don't really have any problem with learning a little bit more about our favourite characters. I know that in the after show we've been hoping that we might see an episode like all about Magic's backstory, and then an episode all about Jen's backstory, and an episode all about Addison's backstory, and so on. So it's nice having some of that stuff filled in. The only thing I'll say, Matt, you were saying you had nothing to critique about the episode, and I have very little, but the only thing that I do think I could critique is after Gossip Girl XOXO got sent to his quarters, we had Ben go to try and convince him to take command. But just out of the blue, then XO says, "Oh, she doesn't love me anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. I might have to leave." That just seemed like it came really out of place, like from nowhere, and seemed very out of place. I don't know where you would be able to put it in or how you could more organically get that conversation in there. I know it had to happen, but that's kind of the only thing that took me out of what was, I thought, otherwise a perfectly paced episode.
See, to me, I totally get where you're coming from. It didn't bother me because I felt that he had the episode to be so focused on what was going on in the military part of the story, and then suddenly he's taken out of that and told, you're offline now, you're off duty, go and sit and think in a corner. And when you're sitting and thinking in a corner, other things are going to come to the fore. So that was just how that was how I rationalized that in my head, that he was just like, okay, I can't think about work. Oh God, there's all this family stuff now bubbling under.
I'm on Team Hayden with this one, and I think there could have been a very easy fix.
Is this the first time
ever? Because maybe, probably. I hope so. No, what I think is that the way that they could have fixed this is everybody's calling each other XO and by their titles, Chief Petty Officer, Ops. When they're in their quarters together, have Augustine call Rossi by his first name, and just right there's okay, we have a history of familiarity, and you maybe already know some of this stuff about me and about my daughter and about the estranged relationship. I think that they could have just dropped into a little bit more of a familiar tone, and then it doesn't seem to come out of nowhere, because I really did think it was, we need to have this established in the show, therefore we're just going to stick it in here because we're taking a break from the action. You just needed one line, one word. We never got Rossi's first name. It would have been nice to know. We never, in this episode, I don't know where you guys are getting his first name from. It was never mentioned once. And I listened hard because I was doing the rundown to see what his name was. It wasn't even in the press photos. They called him XO Augustine. Where did we get the first name confirmation from? Do you guys, can you tell me?
Brandon mentioned it in the interview. I thought it came up in the episode, but I might have imagined that, but I'm sure. But Brandon definitely referred to himself as Alexander.
Maybe it was in promotional stuff that we were given.
That he did.
I'm not sure.
So it must have been in the script, and
that scene didn't bump me at all. I just, in my head, I just assumed these guys spend 24/7 together for months at a time at sea, and they had a prior relationship where they could speak openly about themselves, while keeping it within chain of command order when they needed to, but also speak freely. But I could see where your suggestion, Chris, would have made it like instantaneously like communicate that. But I just assumed, probably from watching Star Trek, that's technically a Navy show, kind of military show. So, people have interpersonal relationships also besides their command roles.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Addison's
crying in other episodes really didn't affect me for this episode. And this episode, I was surprised. By the end of that, I was teary-eyed, and I wasn't crying, but I was emotional, and I really felt it. I think because we've earned that scene from getting to know Addison and some of her backstory peppered in here and there. And I was just really touched by it.
Yeah. Did anyone else get MIA vibes between Addison and her father? There's the part where Addison had said, you know, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And then a little bit later on, it seems like the father felt her presence, and he says the same thing back to reassure Addison as well. I got MIA vibes there that, you know, if there is a strong enough connection between the two people, then they might not realize that each other is there, but, you know, they still might be able to sense each other's feelings and be able to project what they want on each other.
I didn't pick up on that at the time, although, yeah, I totally get that. But even just the very basics of giving a character the chance to say something to a loved one that they weren't able to do in reality, that fundamentally that brings back that whole MIA feeling. I hadn't thought of the connection though. Thanks.
Like from what Hayden said, like how I kind of took that scene is that he kind of felt like his future daughter was like talking to him. So like it was just like self-consciousness, but he felt like she was there, but he knew that she wasn't, even though that she was there.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I'd never picked up on that vibe. It's an interesting observation, and like you said, Matt, it's kind of in the wheelhouse of Quantum Leap. It's sort of that family reunion, and it's funny, Albie, that you would invoke Star Trek before for the way the crew might relate to each other on their off-duty hours, but Star Trek always had more of a feel of like a happy space family. I think that was one of the tenets of the show. They wanted to get that sort of collegial family dynamic going after the first couple of seasons of a show so that they could have more interesting interpersonal relationships. And I saw this more as a straight military. You know, this is the Navy. Chain of command is everything, and everybody's got a place in the pecking order. So that's why I think it also stood out to me so much. But that's an interesting take from I hadn't considered that. So yeah, interesting wrinkle. What I loved more about this, though, I mean, going back onto the reality side, and I know, Albie, you probably love this too. It reminded me of the Martian Serenity, cover your ears. We're going to science the shit out of this. I think that it was terrific that no matter what obstacle they came against in this episode, violence was never the answer. And they always found a good scientific solution to every single thing that was posed. And it goes back to the synergy between the project and the Leap, in the sense that we have this little fragment. What can we do with it? And then you have a team working on what we can do with it. And okay, it turns out that we can verify that this is an American signal. We know definitively that this came from the Tampa and that it is an SOS and that we do need to go save them. And the fact that, okay, they got hit, and okay, is this a torpedo? No, we know definitively it's not a torpedo, even though the captain is insistent that it is. Number one, even Augustine said it in the episode. We have $50 million worth of equipment, and how did they not catch it? So Ben puts everybody to task to figure out what it is, and they find the minefield. And I thought that was great. So, okay, how do we get through the minefield? You know, they set up a series of problems, but they always found a solution. And is that, you know, of course you're going to do that in a show. That's the writing, you know, but it didn't feel like they were going through the numbers here. You know, it felt like organic problems that were arising as a course of the drama, and finding like really cool ways around all of those problems that led to the positive outcome. So that to me is endemic of what Quantum Leap should be. Like that's in its DNA, finding positive solutions to seemingly unworkable problems. Usually it's on a more human level, but I enjoyed seeing it on a scientific level here, because we're all nerds.
Yeah.
And
I have to agree with you there, Chris. It was great too that the project was able to come up with ways that people in 1989 would be able to explain how they would know that it's from the Tampa, how they would know that it was a mine, how to get through the minefield, rather than having to use future knowledge or technology in order to be able to do this. It's good that they were able to make it time appropriate, I'd actually wondered, even in the previous episode, Family Style, how are they going to be able to catch Kathy in the act of burning the house down? And my sci-fi brain was going, well, maybe because they're watching everything at the project, maybe they've got a video of it happening, and maybe they can somehow leap the video back so that they can, watch it and pass it off as security footage or something like that. But this episode was better simply because they were able to come up with ways, all right, they're in 1989, this is how people in 1989 are going to be able to get to verify these things.
Chris, just going back to what you were saying about the solutions to the problems, and this is another Star Trek compare and contrast that I noticed.
We're doing that a lot lately.
You're a bad influence,
I know, but this again. But I mean, at the end of the day, Star Trek is based on the Navy in terms of the way the militaristic elements work, and one of Star Trek's downfalls, which this episode did not fall into at all, is the way they solved the other big problem, which was the crazy captain. Now, any Star Trek ship out there where a captain goes crazy, within 2 minutes of the episode starting, the first officer is going to be relieving them of command because they're not fit for duty. I love the way that this episode did not go there. It just kept teasing that, and they kept trying to find ways of having to convince him, no, calm down, think about it this way, think about it that way. And eventually, when it did happen, it was mutiny and it was messy, and it was not that just kind of, oh, I'm the first officer and I can see that you're nuts, which is what Star Trek would have presented. And that in terms of, again, just going back to the same point you just made, Chris, about the science, that is, again, a very Quantum Leap way of looking at it. It's looking at the people and the personality of the captain and how everyone was interacting with him. And that, I think, was one of the strongest parts of the episode for me.
Yeah, and to that point, because it shows you that we're dealing with human problems too, and solving them on a human level. It gave us a way to get to know Addison's father a lot better, and to see how he ticks and what he respects and what he values. And obviously, Captain Drake is his hero. He loves Captain Drake. He respects Captain Drake. He wants nothing more than to serve with Captain Drake and do the best job he can. But at the same time, he has other responsibilities to the crew, to himself, to his country. So how does he thread that needle? And watching him go through all this is something that helps Addison come to terms with, this is not the guy who I thought he was. This is a much different person. And when we're talking about that scene again that we brought up, that Hayden compared to MIA, when Addison is having her speech at the end, and she's talking about, you're the man who made me. You're the man who taught me everything I know. That is a 180 completely from where we started at the beginning, when she said he was the most stoic, unfeeling person I ever met. So it begs the question, and we're going to get into some of the timey-wimey things. Do you think Addison's past with her dad has changed as a result of the events of this leap? Do you think that he's still left? Do you think, because he says it's going to be okay. That's what I inferred from what I watched. And that's the ending that I want, because I think it's really cool and timey-wimey. So
I think that they established in Let Them Play that anything that happens in the real world, the changes that occur due to Ben and Addison teaming up together in the past, is Addison is not affected. Anyone in the imaging chamber is not affected. To me, that seems to be where the bubble is, unless it moves because of the monitor that Ian had during the Halloween episode, because that's different from what they established later on with Let Them Play. But I think that if Alexander Augustine did change, and like he did stay with the mother and the daughter didn't leave them because of that moment and the changing in history, and maybe that little psychic pep talk that he got from his daughter, I think that would change the outside world, but I don't think that would change the Addison that we're following.
Yeah, so doesn't that bring the interesting possibility that she's going to step out of the imaging chamber into a world where Alexander is still there, and Alexander remembers his daughter growing up perhaps a little softer, a little better rounded, but she is still the same Addison, and she's got to try and adjust to that. That's got big implications for her.
And the fact that she's likely to remember both timelines as well. Like, we saw in the original series, Al remembered everything. So Addison's likely to remember both timelines if her experience has changed throughout as well.
And I think Brandon might have slipped a little bit when he said that it really doesn't affect Addison until the next episode. So he might know a little bit more than he's telling us. So
yeah, that's a sneak peek of the interview that we did with Brandon. So stick around after the break.
Very interesting.
I was wondering that too. He seemed to be a little bit matter of fact about it, but hey, he didn't spoil anything technically. So no, but yeah.
I read into a lot of things.
Yeah. And I asked him the same question on the interview. That's how it came up. So, but I really want to get your guys' take on it as well, because it was one of the two really timey-wimey things in this episode that I wanted to touch upon. Again, with history changing around everybody. So we know that in the original history, when Ben first leaps in, that S.O. Augustine was blamed for not rescuing the Tampa because he ignored the S.O.S. But then Ben changes that history so that they are going to rescue the Tampa, and then things escalate to the point where it's almost World War III, where that never was the case in the original history. So it makes it very interesting that we have Magic going in to talk to his Chinese counterpart at the time, that was Lu Wei, who was played by Kelvin Han Yi. Wonderfully, I thought that was one of the best scenes in the episode, the two of them going back and forth. But they're saying those were dark times, and those, we came very close. There was, it's too bad we weren't talking back then, that kind of stuff. I think that conversation of necessity was so masterfully oblique, yet still interesting, because technically the events that they remember should already be changing around them, and their memories are going to be different because we've already seen the effect that Ben has had on the original history. So I think that this is one of the potential complications and pitfalls of having a back at the project side, because as history is shifting around them, how do they navigate it? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they remembering? And I find it a fascinating wrinkle to explore. I don't know if the show is going to explore it. Did you guys pick up on that? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this a little before, and I'm still of the view that, yeah, like you say, Chris, I don't think the show is necessarily going to land on anything, because we do have this whole complex thing that we are, in the project time, we are already living in an alternate timeline where Ian has gone back in time and changed history. So if there's anything that suggests that what they're doing now is what causes Ian to go back, the whole thing kind of falls apart. So I think we're going to have to squint a bit. They may have a full explanation for all that, but I think there will be probably inconsistencies. And you know what? If the drama's good, I don't care. But I don't think everything's going to quite hang together. And the same for the fact that we're now living in a world that's where there was nearly World War III. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think we might have discussed this in the past, Chris, when we talked a little bit about your book. I remember there's a scene in your book where there's, what was her name? Anne-Marie, was it? She goes back and there's a chance that she kills Sam, and because of that, we've got, things in flux in the present time and things constantly changing and they can't keep track of what's going on. I actually don't really see that happening very much in the show. The way that I've always seen it is it's all to do with probabilities. They're going to stay on the same timeline that they're on until there's essentially a 0% chance that that timeline can't actually happen again. Like, nothing actually changes until it's completely certain that it's going to change. So I don't really see them having that kind of struggle that you're thinking of, if that's the thought process that they seem to be taking. It seems like that might be the most consistent sort of path throughout the whole series, the original and the new one that they've been taking. So, but I'm not saying that what you're thinking wouldn't be really interesting, seeing time essentially in flux and seeing things changing throughout the same episode. that would be really cool to see. But I do think that it would probably be a bit too much of a mind bleep for anyone who's watching and trying to keep track of, and for any non-time travel geeks aside from us. So.
It's funny you mention that, because I've spoken about this on the show, that this was one of my big issues with the novels, that because of the amount of time set back at the project, they had to deal with, all right, what do we do with an ever-changing timeline? Okay, we have an ever-changing timeline, and that never felt satisfying to me. And I've recently, and very late, discovered the 2016 show Timeless, which is that has at its core, that's the whole principle of it. Every time they return to the present day, they discover stuff has changed around them. And I'm halfway through it, don't give me spoilers.
I never watched it.
But I'm finding that a lot more satisfying than I would have thought. I would have thought that was very frustrating, and I did find it a bit frustrating with the novels, and I'm glad they're kind of avoiding that with the new series of QL. But equally, if they did start going down that route and having constantly changing timelines, I've now seen a TV show where that works, and that works really well. So maybe.
Yeah. And I think that you can explore it more in the novels, just to put a bow on the point for the comparison between the novels and the show. The novels, you can take deep dives because you're in the headspace of the characters, you have pages to fill, and you get to do all the fan theories. I think, Hayden, in my book, if I recall, if I can quote myself, it's been 30 years since I wrote it, but Al says something along the lines that they were coasting along on a sliver of probability that was shrinking, ever shrinking. So you didn't know when the scales would tip and things would be irrevocably changed. In a book, you can do that because you're indulging and you're exploring, and you have a lot more space to do that. In a 42-minute show, it might be a bit complicated to have those kinds of things floating around all the time and disconcerting to viewers. And Timeless, I recall, was doing that, but they did it in such a way that it was always after the fact. And it was always, okay, this is what it was before, and this is what it is now, right? So I guess that could be a model for doing it in a more simplistic way for a television audience.
And that does seem to be the focus of that series. Quantum Leap already has a lot of other stuff going on, putting right what ones went wrong, and the mystery box, and all this stuff, throwing in a changing timeline.
Just a little too much, right?
Yeah.
I won't spoil Timeless for you, Matt, other than to say it has a proper ending, so it won't leave you hanging. It didn't get canceled without a resolution, so it's very satisfying.
It got a movie at the end, didn't it? So.
Yep. So it's a very satisfying journey, and it was done very well.
I'm so glad. Yeah.
It's so great. I think I was looking for little subtle changes because Ian had mentioned they had said that it would take large events for things to change the timeline. And I was thinking there's 138 men and women, 138 people on the submarine, the Tampa, that survived. That's 138 different time streams that are changing everything around them that affects everything around the globe. Yeah. How is that not a big enough thing? And when Magic was speaking with his counterpart, I was looking for subtle clues in their conversation. Later on, he said we did get lucky that day, and they didn't really mention it. So maybe the timeline was already affecting him. I was looking for subtle clues, like maybe the color of a tie changes. Maybe the car they took there changed. Maybe the location changed. I would like to see little subtle things that some people might see as continuity errors, but then we would know that the timeline is changing. But I didn't see any evidence of that. Maybe there is, and I just missed it.
Those 138 lives touched others, and their lives others.
That's a lot.
And one of those lives changed someone's color of their tie.
Well, now that you're invoking the bartender and the sage words of the bartender, I mean, this is the episode that finally gives us some kind of nod, albeit somewhat obliquely, to GTF Dubs. Magic has an amazing speech with Jen towards the end where he talks about the arc of history. Magic quotes Martin Luther King where he says,
I don't believe beliefs are random. I don't believe it's all just a roll of the dice. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. That's what I think we are. What Quantum Leap is. Part of whatever mysterious force bends that arc for the better.
That to me is at tantamount to finally admitting that there might be some kind of higher power, whatever you call it, at play here. Aside from Ben's machinations, aside from Futurine leaping, aside from Martinez coming into the picture, Magic sees a bigger picture. And I loved getting back to that.
I agree with you, Chris, that, it's great seeing the allusion to GTF dubs and the fact that he says that he doesn't think that the leaps are random. And, I mean, we already knew that because they were pre-programmed. But the fact that, there is this sort of grand design that he's seeing, and that, they had to pre-program the leaps this way because there is something bigger going on. It makes perfect sense in the grand scheme of Quantum Leap. It really feels like, the writers had been listening to all the concerns and criticisms that everyone had, that it didn't feel enough like a continuation of the original story. And so they've said, all right, we're going to do this episode as the perfect continuation.
All right. And one thing that did confuse me, to that point that you were making, Hayden, that Ben is sort of the architect of where he's going now, to Slingshot, to whatever future point. But then Ian says something right in the beginning. They say Ben cannot target a specific place in time. How is that not a direct contradiction to everything we've been building towards since the beginning of the show? Did anyone notice that? Because I'm still, scratching my head over that one.
Well, it depends how. Yeah. This is pure headcanon stuff, but it depends how specific those places and times are that we saw when they first brought up that big 3D map in episode 2, 3, whatever it was. I've always been of the belief that Ben is on some kind of route that he's mapped out himself, and that route may not be that specific, and that's where GTFW is stepping in and saying, all right, well, if you need to be in the late 80s, 1989 on this warship is the place you need to be to fix this thing. And so there is an element of both, which is, it kind of marries up with the original series in that, Sam was trying to make some leaps, and possibly the first one was fairly targeted, but then GTFW was stepping in and guiding. This may be a bit more of both, where Ben has done some plotting, but still there is that element of GTFW saying, this is the person, this is the time, this is the place.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Matt. I think the way I saw it was, okay, Ben might not be able to specifically target, this warship at this particular point in time, but there might be a particular ballpark that he might want to end up in. If he wants to end up in the far future, then he's got to end up in the ballpark of these particular places first to within a certain degree, and then he can be slingshotted as far out as he needs to go.
I'm of two minds about it. I thought one possibility was maybe that when Ben was programming his route, or whoever's helping him also helping him program it, maybe he had snap on to where he'd go, I want to go about there, and it went whoop, just to get it, an event that would help. The other thought I had was maybe he specifically, we won't find out until Ben gets his memory back, but maybe he went back specifically because of Addison's father, and maybe that he needed to do that to change what happened in the future, but we won't know that. I think how the writer Dean Georgeris wrote this, it was very well done because it left it open to whatever interpretation we're seeing, but also it gives them more options in the future. Or I'm sure they already have a plan for it, but I really enjoyed that part of it, the whole tie into Addison.
I also think that, he might have to go to certain places in a certain order, kind of like a continuation of what my dad was saying, where, he might have had to do that to change the future to where he's going to leap to next. So then it can have a certain outcome. Maybe some other leap made sure that person, one person on the ship was there, and that made a difference that day. and just doing leap by leap could make out the outcome of saving Addison.
That's a cool thought. Like, so he's on a train and he's laying the track in front of him as he goes. Brilliant, kiddo. I love it.
Love it.
I have a podcasting brain.
It's in the genes.
You sure do.
I mean, I was listening to my parents' podcasting when I was a little baby.
True.
But I mean, that being said, he's got his plans, but we see here with the return of Martinez that someone is working against him. Mind blown. Everybody, Matt, I just want you to start. Where do we begin with Martinez? I mean, what's going on?
You know, I was so happy to see the reuse of the footage of him saying, "I know who you are, Dr. Ben," song from the year 2022. I felt like they did that for me. Best line of the show. I know.
They could have. People know you.
Mm-hmm. I know Hayden touched on this at the start, but it's a shame for those of us that have been scouring the production photos that we knew that Martinez had leaped into Walker. There's such a wonderful trail that's left through the episode of here's this kooky guy Walker from Mississippi, and that's really fun. And then a shock ending, which those of us that have seen the photos was expecting. But yeah, I mean. The thing that interests me is Dean had sort of hinted that this episode was going to be an arc-heavy one, and I had this vision of it being a big showdown with loads of Martinez in it, and actually it's just a regular leap that has sown a whole bunch of seeds that I guess is going to pay off in 118. So I feel teased and excited for the next 4 weeks, but yeah, I need more Martinez in my life. And more Janice, but we'll come back to that.
Well, I was going to ask, can I just say, when Ben was on the phone, remember there's the part where he says, "Oh, who's this?" And then he asks, "Is you know who there?" Sorry, I don't remember what their names were. But he's like, "Who's this? Is what's his name there?" And then he puts what's his name on.
It's Walker.
Do you reckon? Yeah. Do you reckon he's noticing there that it's Martinez's voice and it's not the voice of the person that he was expecting?
No, because he was talking to Martinez the whole time. But Martinez was in Walker. Now,
Okay.
I have a theory on this because he was talking to Martinez as Walker throughout on the comm. And then on the third pass, somebody else is on the comm. And then Martinez comes back to the comm. Could he be talking to two different Martinezes at that point? Right? So who knows? Because what I love about the fact that we got the Martinez reveal, he says something to the effect to Ben, "You helped me. I reckon I couldn't have done what you did from where I was sitting." And Ben is like, "I don't understand." And Martinez is like, "Yeah, that's why I'm going to win." And the other thing that I loved about when you got the reveal and you knew who Walker was throughout the entire thing, he was just straight up messing with Ben throughout the whole episode with that Mississippi stuff and what'd you think? I threw it away, and it's just like little needles,
Yes.
And this to me is like the best possible manifestation of the mystery box, right? Because we don't know yet what's going on. We do not have the bigger picture, but having Ben be the stand-in for us, not knowing either, not understanding, and then having the bad guy basically twirl his mustache and leap. I mean, epic. Beautiful moment. I loved every single bit of it.
Yes.
I had no idea that Walker was Walter Perez, Martinez, Leaper X, until, of course, the second viewing, because I didn't recognize his voice over the comms the first time. But rewatching it when it's somebody else and Ben was like, "Who is this? Put Walker on." I thought maybe Martinez had leaped into Walker, then leaped out, and then he leaped back in. Is kind of like on hold or something, So I enjoyed that part. A little bit of behind the scenes info about Leaper X in this episode is when Dean first wrote this episode, there was no Martinez in it. at all.
Mm.
That Martin had asked him to put that in there, and Martin actually wrote the final scene of the episode when it was about Leaper X and Ben. So that's interesting.
And that's executive producer Martin Jarrow, right?
Yes.
Well, this episode made me think maybe we've got Martinez, Leaper X all wrong. When he said, I couldn't have done what I did without you, it made me think maybe Ben isn't leaping to try and stop Martinez. Maybe Ben leaping to save Addison is then what has caused some sort of cataclysm, and Martinez has now had to go and leap to try and stop Ben and put right some of the things that Ben got wrong during his leaps. So maybe it could actually be the case that if Martinez hadn't been there, Ben wouldn't have been able to succeed in the leap, and then actually did cause World War III or something along those lines. And maybe Martinez had to do something from his end in order to be able to actually get it back on track and get the outcome that we ended up having. So, like, the wording that he uses is always really interesting. He's saying, don't follow me. Maybe it's because Martinez has had to go back and keep track of what Ben's been doing and trying to get all of Ben's actions back on track. Maybe there's more mistakes going on that we're not seeing because Martinez is, like, behind the curtain, putting some of those extra things back on track. What do you think?
Right. And you know what? I was thinking that too. And the fact, this is what confuses me. I'm sort of in your headspace with this, Hayden, but the fact that at the very end, he says, that's why I'm going to win. They're obviously working somehow at cross purposes with one another, even though on this leap, what it seemed to me, Ben's presence on this leap was a useful accident for Martinez in achieving his goals, maybe somehow. Once we reveal the bigger picture, I'm hoping that it slots into place and we're like, oh yeah, you know, and we'll get the whole puzzle revealed and everything will fit together. But I still feel that there's some kind of antagonism there, and clearly Martinez does not think that he is the bad guy. He thinks that Ben is the bad guy. That's what I picked up from this. So weeks ago,
we're
they
all
kept
the hero
on
in our own
about,
story.
Yeah, exactly. And they kept on talking about, are we really the heroes here? Are we doing the right thing? So I'm just so intrigued to see where this goes, because it's just like, oh, it's so juicy. And finally, you know, we're going to get mystery box nonsense. Give me this kind of mystery box nonsense, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, it could be that perhaps Ben's leaped back to try and save Addison, but Martinez has an idea of what happens if Addison survives, and maybe in his mind he sees, no, Addison has to die for the greater good. Maybe that's where this antagonism comes in, and he sees it as this tug of war, either Addison lives or Addison dies, and there's going to be two very different world outcomes depending on what happens, who manages to win at the end.
Yeah. I'd love the fact that Martinez sees Ben as his useful idiot. It's just the greatest.
Yeah.
I love the mystery box stuff, and I love the Martinez stuff, the Leaper X stuff. And let's take a look at what we know. Ben was told to leap in Addison's place by Ian from the future that leapt back to tell Ben that. So I think it's the possibility that Ben is on a personal mission to maybe save Addison, and not just leaping for the greater good. So it might be a reveal at some point that if you had to go, you know, good leaper, evil leaper, that Ben is the evil leaper because he's trying to accomplish his goal, no matter the effect, you know, like in Fringe, when you go across realities to get your kid back or something. You don't care about destroying a whole, you know, reality if you get your kid back. So Ben, we might find out later, doesn't care about destroying the world and causing an Armageddon as long as he gets Addison back. And I think that's a possibility as to where we're going, but I don't know that. And also, what did you guys think? I know we talked a little bit about it when the production photos came out, but Walter Perez had some gray in his hair, which leads me to believe that the Walter Perez we're seeing now, the Leaper X we're seeing now, is from a maybe 10, 15 years in the future, and he's been leaping this whole time. So what are your thoughts on why and that's taken place, and why is that a point that they made?
He does make a point to say, oh, you came across the younger me, you know who I am. But he probably did not have any useful intel to give you. So they did make mention of the fact that, you know, we have a younger and an older Martinez. And I noticed that in the press photos that he had the gray in his hair. I had mentioned it to Matt.
Yeah.
So I kind of expected that we were going to be dealing with an older Martinez here. But yeah, how long has this guy been
gray
leaping?
hair just happens from leaping. We saw it happen with Sam.
Gray hair and crow's feet. Yeah. So
he's got that white spot.
I got nothing. I got Matt. Come to my rescue.
With what?
with Albie's point about like what Martinez? He's playing what's his long game?
Yeah, I do hope that that Martinez isn't just a mustache twirling villain who's trying to take over the world. I hope that he does believe he's doing the right thing, and Albie's point is a perfect example of that, where the right thing may be very different if you've got a personal stake in it, as Ben does. So yeah, I think that's perfectly plausible.
Yeah, and let's not forget too that they, in the episode where they went and visited Martinez at his home, they went out of their way to show that he's, you know, this person with a squeaky clean military record who will immediately jump at the opportunity to, you know, to serve his country and to, you know, help out where needed. That if that's the sort of person that we're dealing with, unless he's a very good actor, it does make me think that, you know, he's trying to do something for the greater good somewhere along the way, even if it's against what Ben wants.
Kind of earlier in the episode, when Drake said, I know, but like if we follow the rules, the ship might sink or something. But just follow the rules and like you won't get in trouble from that. Just looking like back from the future, like somebody else looking back, you don't have anything to blame if you did if you did what you were supposed to. So yeah, I was just like, you could just follow the rules.
Speaking of Drake, I liked the fact that he called out Moby Dick, because his character was basically Captain Ahab. He was going after that sub no matter what it did to anybody else. So I like that little mention, that little showing of it.
Good Easter egg.
Reminds me of First Contact.
Drake's character was interesting because he just seemed determined to take out the Chinese, whether he had recourse to do it or not. And so it does show that there is, you know, a lot of bias in a lot of different people, and that affects people's decisions. So, and especially in the climate that we're in at the moment, I think that a lot of people watching would probably agree with him. Take them out while you can. I don't, but I think that a lot of people will resonate with that character simply because of, you know, what's going on in the world at the moment.
I like the moment when Drake looked at himself in the reflection and realized what he was doing and how he wasn't proud of himself. And that was the moment when he decided. So another take on, you know, the man in the mirror, even though it's himself.
And just
maybe somebody's leaping into him.
On the point of Martinez as well, let's not forget in the episode also, Ben was having a lot of trouble with his maths, and they were saying, we've only got 1,100 feet, 1,000 feet, 900 feet. We need these results straight away. And he's like, well, I'm kind of in the ballpark. Just do this and that. I actually think that maybe what Martinez was doing was he's got the knowledge of where the mines are. And when he's got the approval to shoot, he actually knows where to send them. So that's what I think Martinez was actually doing. He was the one ensuring that they get through the minefield.
It kind of reminds me like when they do like kind of, should I say like flash forwards or flashbacks? It's like where he was writing down all the math. It kind of reminded me of that scene because he was trying to figure out math. He was writing math in, I think, the same color marker or something and kind of the same board. So it kind of reminded me of that. I didn't know if they did that on purpose or not, but I just noticed that.
Well, now we're talking about math. I think that we've mined, you get it, mined just about all we're going to from this episode of Quantum Leap. So, math is my cue to drop out. So why don't we get some final thoughts on S.O.S? Matt, we'll start with you.
Nothing we've talked about has dissuaded me from the fact that this is an episode that I cannot find critique with. There's some wonderful action. Brandon has some fantastic emotional moments which he grabs with both hands and does such a good job with. I was tense, I was crying, and of course Leaper X. Is it my favorite episode of the series so far? No, because there's some episodes that have been flawed but have been to some really interesting places. But it's consistently good for 42 minutes, and I can't fault it for that. It's very watchable.
How about you, Albie?
I'm going to give it definitely a hard 7 out of 5 low resonance steel mines, because it had me on the edge of my seat. I was, if I had one criticism of the episode, Walter Perez's name being in the opening credits for casual viewers that aren't, looking at production photos and stuff, that would ruin it for them right there. That's something they should put at the end. I know contracts are different, but there's ways to do that. And so that's a little disappointing, because that is a great reveal, Leaper X. And when you can know it's coming for 40 minutes, it's not as exciting. The episode had me on the edge of my seat. Like I was saying, it was very good. I loved Brandon in it. I loved Caitlin in it. Their scenes together were great. The father-daughter dynamic, learning more about Addison was great. And overall, I just enjoyed it. And I was surprised how much I did enjoy it. But yeah, man, it's great.
How about you, Rennie?
Just to start off, I would probably rate it a 4 out of 5 mines. And they could have done a little bit better, but it was a really, really good episode, and I loved it. But as Matt was saying, it's not my favorite episode, but it definitely is amazing.
Cool. And Hayden?
I know that Deborah's been saying how much she wanted to do Kisses with History. She missed out on the perfect opportunity to do one here, because this was, I think, May 1989. Well, Cher's If I Could Turn Back Time was released in July of 1989. And what they could have done is said, all right, as a reward, you're getting this special show, and then find when they get back to port that Cher's going to be entertaining them, and then have the song Turn Back Time play over the credits or something like that. So they really missed out, because the timing would have been absolutely perfect. But having said that, I am going to give this episode 5 gun turret straddling Cher's entertaining the troops out of 5.
And there's nothing wrong with your headcanon saying that happened, Hayden. Exactly. There's nothing to say it didn't, so...
Yeah, there's nothing to say there's... Okay, you're a lunatic. Anyway...
Well, I said that at the start.
I don't have much to add. I think you guys have said it all. I just think that this was a solid episode of Quantum Leap, as solid an episode of Quantum Leap that the reboot series has given us. And I am excited to see the next 4 or 5 episodes that we have left. I hope that they build on the momentum that we've gotten here. And just a special shout out to Brandon Routh. When I first heard that he was cast as Addison's dad, I was happy. When Addison described him as stoic and unfeeling, I was just like, huh? Brandon Routh? Mr. Goofy Grin himself, Brandon Routh? But he did a wonderful job playing a nuanced character, a believable character. And as much as I like the Leap stuff, I like the history stuff, I like the lore stuff, I just liked everything about this episode. It was a really good episode. Thank you, Dean, for writing it. One of the standouts so far of the series. So I'm going to say that puts this discussion of S.O.S. in the books, but stay tuned, because when we come back, we will be bringing you that interview with Brandon Routh.
But first, Hayden, don't we have some bills to pay?
Yeah, we do. Well, look, we're sponsored by Canpakes once again. And look, Albie, how many times have you noticed somebody just talking to themselves out of thin air? And, you know, I know us Quantum Leap fans really do like that, and we think that Sam Beckett or Ben Song are out there putting right what once went wrong, but chances are they're actually experiencing the brand new hallucinogenic Canpakes maple cubes. They will give you the most intelligent conversation you have ever had in your life. So make sure you go on to quantumleappodcast.com/Canpakes and try out the brand new maple cubes. And yeah, you're going to have the most intelligent, eye-awakening experience of your life.
Legal in all 57 states.
Absolutely.
And right now, if you use our code, which is Quantum Leap Aftershow, and also for this one, you could do QLP, you get 23% off until the end of season 1 of Quantum Leap.
I feel like I just slipped into a parallel universe.
All right, guys, I know you know this song. Da, 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 da. Everybody. Da, 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 da.
Indiana Jones?
Dun, dun, dun.
Superman.
Matt, don't tell me. You know that is the theme to Superman. And as promised, we are and as promised, here is our interview with Brandon Routh. Hello, Leapers. This is Chris, and I am joined today with Matt, Albie, and Serenity to welcome to the podcast our very special guest, Mr. Brandon Routh. Brandon, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast.
Hey, hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
This is just a terrific honor for us. I mean, we've spoken to most of the main cast and most of the guest cast, but I never thought that Quantum Leap would allow me to speak to Superman himself. So welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
Super to have you.
Wait, was that a pun?
Yeah, we get a lot of those around here. So, well, yeah, I mean, you certainly need no introduction to most fans listening now with your turn as Superman and your involvement with the CW's Arrowverse as the Adam Ray Palmer. Can you tell us how you jumped franchises and came to Quantum Leap?
I think, it all started with Superman, really. Put me in the genre for sure. And then I don't really think being part of Legends of Tomorrow necessarily helped as far as my qualifications in being part of a time traveling show. But certainly bringing Ray Palmer to life was helpful in all of that. But I got a lovely had a lovely meeting with Dean Jugaris, co-showrunners. They presented the script to me, or the outline of the script, and told me about the significance of the role I'd be playing, which was exciting. And I was a big Quantum Leap fan from growing up, a child of the 80s and 90s, watching Quantum Leap. And I was very excited, had an amazing meeting with him. And also, the kicker was that the episode was going to be filmed on the USS Iowa, which is docked in Long Beach, California, and I'm from Iowa. And they had a dedication about 10 years ago for the USS Iowa when they were opening it as a museum there, but I wasn't able to attend, so it was very cool to be able to be there and be on it and film on it and participate. So it felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about sort of the filming location and the circumstances, because this episode of Quantum Leap is so much more action oriented than we usually get on the show. And you had some really tight, intense scenes. And when you were filming, the location was the Iowa. Were those stage sets? Were you filming mainly on the boat, or was it just the exteriors? Like, tell us what the shooting was like, because it was so unique to Leap, you know?
The first 3 days were on the USS Iowa. We were inside the ship. We were on the exterior of the ship. We used as much of the ship as possible. All all of the scenes involving the what is it called, the threat display, the can't remember the technical name for the two places. One was the darker room where we're looking over the screen and managing, what's happening, and then the exterior where you're seeing out onto the ship through the windows, the main command area, were both amazing sets that set deck and our team and carpenters and everybody made. It was just like the real thing.
Yeah, it seems to me like very claustrophobic, almost like you were on a submarine at times.
Yeah, I mean, I have not been on a submarine, and I think it's probably like even less room on a submarine, but certainly being 6'3", trying to traverse and run through the halls of the actual ship was challenging. I was a permanent stoop for 3 days to make sure that I didn't get a concussion. I didn't, so that's good.
Thank goodness, right? So you had mentioned that when reading the script, you had spoken to Dean about sort of the pivotal role of your character, not only in the episode, but in the larger Quantum Leap universe. They introduced us in this episode to Addison's father. How did knowing this influence the way you approached the role? Did you feel more pressure because of it?
I mean, I felt a little pressure. I don't really feel, doesn't it feel like, I mean, everybody has their own definition of, I guess, what pressure is, but didn't necessarily feel like pressure, but I felt honored by it. So for me, it's pressure, but it's, I take it on as like, okay, now I have to step up. So it is pressure, but I don't, in acting situations, I guess I don't fear it. I just go, okay, so now I just gotta bring it. And that, so it made it more appealing to be a bigger part, even though it was one episode. It was a bigger part of the lore and the history of the show. And so that's what, made it exciting for me. It wasn't just a one-off, character.
As well as it being a pivotal role, it's also a very deep and emotional role. There's a lot of quite dark places you had to go to. Was that something that was clear when it was being pitched to you? And did that give you pause in terms of whether to accept the role and how you approached it, or did that just come out afterwards?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So I didn't actually, when they approached me, they didn't have a full script yet. They had a very detailed outline of like what most scenes and kind of like a little bit of a scripting of what might be said and of like the main point, the main thrust of a scene. And I think the two major scenes in my quarters were kind of laid out, and talked to Dean about that. And for me, I guess it might still surprise most people who've been watching me or don't know of my career much, but my first love is comedy. It's the genre, it's the style of acting that I have the most fun at on a day-to-day basis, and I'm most free when I'm able to be silly and irreverent. So this was the opposite of that. But I'm in a place in my career and in my life, I guess, where I'm working on emotional authenticity and really being able to speak truthfully in those heavy moments. So this was an opportunity to practice that in a very big, real way, because it wasn't, monsters attacking or aliens or, something sci-fi. Because that's normally where I play. This was real life, father-daughter and son-father dynamics playing. So I was a little bit hesitant, but also like, oh, this is an opportunity to learn. I'm gonna go through this door, and I'm gonna, put my best foot forward.
In this episode, it was very emotional, the scenes with you and Addison. Did you pull anything from your real life experiences to inform your character in this episode?
Oh, well, most definitely. Having now a 10-year-old son, had a wealth of experience with fatherhood and being a parent, and knowing how a parent's emotions and behaviors affect a child. So understanding Alexander's his relationship with his father, his birth father, and the trauma that was created through that experience, him wanting to move away from that and seek another more positive father figure in the captain of the ship. That was intriguing. And then just knowing also that, as a parent, you want the best for your child, and sometimes, and I can see how Alexander got to a place in his experience where he thought, I have to remove myself from her life to a degree so that my darkness, my trauma, is not put on her. Now, there are other ways to handle this, as we know now in 2023. Therapy can help us, so we can engage, because the best option is not to abandon your child, because that creates its own trauma, even if it's a better trauma than, than the other side. But anyway.
I have a question. Two questions, actually. Even though you didn't get to have any scenes per se with Caitlin, because you can't see or hear her technically, did you guys discuss the body language that you would have around each other, and how, even though you aren't communicating, was there any discussion about sort of the backstory that they had and the way that you played when you were in the same scene together?
Great question. No, we didn't. I watched 3 or 4 episodes of the show before I'd gone on the set, and I think I'd seen her stoicness, her matter of fact delivery, and the fact that she in real life, had extensive military service, and that I think that's also the backstory of her character. So that is kind of, I didn't really reflect that necessarily, but I saw that, and so I just, that was part of military. My observance of someone who served and who was a leader. So I adopted, I stepped into those shoes. But other than that, no, not really. We had many discussions about the last scene that we're in together. And that was more from a technical standpoint. I asked if she would like to film her side first or my side first. Sometimes, when you have an emotional scene, one person had, like in that scene, she has the emotion, she has the dialogue, she has all the emotion. It's her scene. I'm participating, but it's mostly her scene. And sometimes an actor wants to go first because they don't want to use all that energy, that emotional energy on while the camera's filming me. But if they're not ready, sometimes they want to go second and, rehearse more. So that was, we had discussions like that. More technical stuff, because they don't have she was 3 or 4 when I, in 89. So there wasn't much interaction between us that would inform.
So I guess that leads to the second part of my question, because it's right there at the end of the episode. She gives that speech, and she mentions that you were the person who shaped her, that taught her everything that she knew, and that to me implied that her history with her father had been altered because of the events of the Leap. Is that how you guys took it, or was there any discussion on that? Because it's only implied, or at least that's what I infer from the scene.
I believe the way that the timey-wimey-ness is that the events that happen in the episode have not reflected into her future until further at the next episode. The Legends of Tomorrow we always played with that. It's it takes some time for time to harden, to solidify. And then other episodes it's happening now. So we played with that logic, but yeah, I think the effects of what she learned and how the relationship grows with her father in episode 13 will be seen, in further episodes, whatever that might be for her. And it's probably slight, adjustments. But
when you first talked to Dean and took this role, was there discussion of multiple appearances, multiple episodes? Do you know of any future episodes you might be in?
I have not been asked to return yet, but there have been there have been, what would I say? Oh, it'd be cool to have you back. Sentiments. It's a time travel show. So who's to say who couldn't come back? In what capacity? Whether it's the '89 version of me or the 2023 version of my character, I don't know. But I would absolutely love to come back. It was a wonderful, welcoming cast and crew. Everyone. It was just a joy to be there, to participate. It's not every job that happens. The best jobs in this business, even if the final outcome isn't what you intend for, the day-to-day is what it's about, and enjoying creating, whether just with your fellow actors or with the entire crew. You build a family and you build a team, and they accepted me as an adopted part of the family for 8 days, and it was great.
I guess the only challenge is if it's the 1979 version of your character that comes back.
Yeah.
Unless you fancy that particular challenge.
In real life.
I had a silly question. While you and Caitlin and Raymond were in the cabin set, your character's cabin, the pictures on the wall, were those pictures of Caitlin? Did you guys talk about that, or was that just some set deck that they took from something else?
I think they weren't Caitlin. I can't remember. I remember her having a reaction to seeing them. That it was either the pictures that they chose or that they weren't her. I can't remember. I know that the pictures of myself and my wife in there, we did those on the Universal back lot, and a lovely young actress came in and was my wife for a day. It's a tough. I've had to do that other times where somebody comes in just solely for photographs. But it's, everybody's important. That's the thing, You can come in, and I've done other photos like that where that person comes in and is kind of not alive in their face, and it makes the photo not look great. And it's a big part. Even though you don't say anything, you appear in the episode only in a small way. All that stuff is important. And she did a great job.
You had mentioned earlier that you were a fan of the original Quantum Leap. Do you have any specific memories of the show growing up, or what's your experience with the original?
I can't pull from any specific episodes. It's mostly about Dean and Scott's just connection and their friendship that sticks with me, and just the overall energy of the show, of that hope and not being too afraid of the unknown, that kind of, for me, I guess, persisted in viewing it. It was, in that time, there was not a lot of, you had your 4 channels at that time?
Yeah.
3 channels? 3. Mm-hmm. And PBS. So, and we didn't have cable for a long time. So, TV was a big deal for me.
I think Rennie had a question.
Yes. How is it being Superman?
It's amazing. It's one of those opportunities that still is somewhat elusive at times to kind of just be able to hold. Because here in my house, I'm just dad. And sometimes I'm the dad that somebody's not happy with because I lay down the law and have to set boundaries. And other times I can be fun dad, but then we go outside and somebody's like, hey, it's Superman. And, it's a whole different, then I shift into, a different part of myself, I guess, to help represent the energy and spirit of Superman, which lives inside me, which lives inside everybody. I just think because of my work, as the character. I've attuned to him more, but not fully. I'm gonna walk around imagining I'm Superman. But it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to know that the most important and the coolest part of it is knowing that the art that I helped create, along with all of the other amazing artists who worked on Superman Returns and who worked on Crisis on Infinite Earths, is that this can really help lift people out of darkness, even if it's for a few hours, and to point toward better possibilities that do exist. That even though we can be sad at times, that everything shifts and changes, and Superman is a beacon of light. And I'm very proud and grateful that I get to help represent that and carry that torch in a little way.
Now, give us the scoop. I know that James Gunn is overseeing the rebranding of the DCEU, and we have some multiple timelines in the new Flash movie. Are you going to be brandishing the big red S in Ezra Miller's Flash movie coming up?
Oh,
come on, you can tell us.
Certainly not. Certainly not in the new Flash movie. The trailer looks amazing. I'm very excited to see that. And as beyond that project, I have no idea. I would absolutely love to. I would jump at the chance to participate again, whether it be as Superman or as Ray Palmer. I think I like to think that Ray can be used in any of those worlds and matches well in that world as well. So I don't know. I can tell you that I'm very excited, and I'm excited to see what James and Peter bring forth, because if there's one thing I know, it's that James loves comic books and appreciates them and values them and values the relationships that are created. The most important thing that happens in his films, in his superhero films, especially in Guardians of the Galaxy, which are excellent, I think my favorites actually of the Marvel universe, is the relationships between these disparate characters. But he creates found family, and that's so important. It's such an important message, so I'm excited for what comes next.
It's funny when you say found family, I can only think of Legends. And when I heard that you were going to be on this episode, I was excited because I was a fan of Legends. But then when Addison described you as cold and distant and kind of a hard ass, all I could think of you is, as Ray with that big goofy grin, always geeking out. And it was a little bit for me to say, okay, let me see how Brandon does it. I think you did great, but I think that the ensemble nature of Legends was terrific. And also the fact that you guys were so irreverent and self-referential. Can you tell us a bit about what it was like to work on that show for so long? Because it evolved so much over the course of the seasons that it was on. To the point where you made yourselves the butt of jokes sometimes in the overall universe of, I guess, the Flash and Arrow. So especially Arrow. Arrow was so dark. You went from the darkest show on the CW to the funniest show on the CW. So
well, I was the funny in Arrow, season 3 anyway, and so then they took me and transplanted me over into Legends of Tomorrow, which just then grew. And I think that's because when Legends started out, they had an idea, where they wanted to use all these talented actors and cool characters, put them on a show, and had an idea for the first season. And then we kind of were open to what was going to happen next. And I think that was one of the cool parts of the show, was that structurally they didn't stick to, it has to be this way, which was a little bit frustrating for actors, because then I was like, wait, but this rule we set up, and then right here now we're like, where's the floor, right? This time, can we change time? Can we not? So that was frustrating from like an actor standpoint, but it really allowed freedom for the show to grow and change, and I think it really became the best version of itself in season 3, through the evolution of season 3, and then season 4 I think was the best episode of the show, best season of the show. And Ray was the comedy, everybody was doing comedy in the first season, but Ray was more broad, and then as the actors and characters grew, it became a little bit more broad, and I just kept taking that. I would just take an inch and or give an inch and take. I would take a mile and see how far I could push it, because that's the fun, that's the joy. And the writers responded, and everyone else, did as well. And the writers then put us in crazy, outlandish, ridiculous positions, and you either had to believe it and go with it, and swim, or sink. And thankfully we swam. We swam.
When they were doing the Crisis crossover, that was the huge event for the entire CW. And was it a given, like from the get-go, that you were going to reprise your role as Superman?
No, not at all. That was a really challenging time, the beginning of that, the inception of that, because I had just found out that I would not be returning for all of season 5, that they decided that my wife and I, Nora Dark, who played Nora Dark, Courtney Ford, who played Nora Dark, were going to be leaving the show halfway through season 5, which was a huge disappointment is such a small word. It was quite crushing for us, because we loved those characters and we loved that show, that world. And then a few weeks later, I got a call from Mark Guggenheim, who had stepped back as a couple seasons ago from Legends, and was overseeing a bunch of everything in the CW verse, pretty much, and all the crossovers. And he said, "Hey, would you be interested in playing Ray in the crossover, but also like playing a character with a different colored suit?" And I said, "Wait, are you talking about Superman?" And he said, "Yeah." So I said, "Wow." I was very shocked. I always held open the possibility, but thought it was incredibly low that CW, Warner Brothers, and DC would all sign off on me returning. But it was true. And that helped kind of turn a little bit of that terribleness into a little bit not so terrible for me, and really helped me gain closure on Superman. It was very affirming for me to just to be asked, and then the response from the fans. Very grateful for that opportunity.
This is going to be such a geek question, but which did you enjoy playing more, Kal-El or Clark?
Is that a cat? I see a cat. Something's attacking you, Matt.
Yes, my cat likes to join in. She's obviously enjoying the interview, so.
Tentacle. Hi, what's the cat's name?
Scully.
Hi, Scully.
Oh, thank you.
Nice. Is there Mulder somewhere?
There is no Mulder.
Oh.
One of these days.
That's a mystery. Well,
12 years Scully's been searching around for Mulder.
Oh. The aliens. It's probably aliens. The question was...
Do you like being Soups or Clark better?
Oh, Soups or Clark?
Yeah. Which was funner to play?
Well, Clark is slightly more fun to play. Clark's less pressure, for sure. I don't have to work out as much. I have to worry about my posture. And I get to be funny and goofy and silly. And be, a different side of Kal-El. But Superman has grown on me as I've gotten older. When I got to play him in Crisis, I felt more like I could actually be Superman. Going from being 24, 25 the first time to 40, that 15 years informed me in many ways, and I felt a little bit more wisdom and worldly experience, and having been also a father at that time, more grounded in my humanity, and like I could actually bring a little bit of groundedness to Superman. So the gap got a little bit closer. It's amazing to be Superman, but that's more pressure and more challenging.
Could you share with us maybe a story or the feeling you got being on set that we might not see in the episode, but you remember from the 8 days filming Quantum Leap?
I mean, you should just know that like Ray and Caitlin are amazing. They are incredibly welcoming and genuine, wonderful human beings. Which is awesome from the 2 stars of the show to have that, because sometimes you can, actors, they can have an ego, right? But they have a healthy amount, both great leaders of the set, welcoming and thankful for their crew, knowing that they're part of a team. I think that's such a huge thing that I appreciate. And then we had a lot of fun. I mean, Ray's a very funny guy. So, cracking jokes with him and silly puns and stuff that I like to do on set. The most funny, not the most funny, but the thing that comes to me is, when Caitlin's in a scene, when she has dialogue, but the camera's looking at me or one of the other characters, especially all the other guest stars, it's very hard not to look at her. She's talking, but we don't see her. So they got me once with that. And a couple other people were like, nope, don't look at Caitlin. Okay, she's not there.
It must be difficult not to look at her.
Yeah.
A little bit, but I've trained myself pretty well.
There you go.
I just want to pick up quickly, if I can, on you mentioned about Ray and Caitlin's leadership. Just in terms of your character, obviously with the CO being pretty much off his rocker, you were the one displaying the most leadership as a character.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like walking onto a set as a one-off guest character in an ongoing series and being the one that everyone is turning to as a leader? How do you fake that?
I'm thinking back to what were the first scenes that I filmed, and the first scenes that I filmed, I think, were running, going down the stairs, and bursting out of my quarters and taking out the man-at-arms. It wasn't a challenge on this show. I think because I was the XO, and they'd written him so full that there was enough understanding of his backstory to know I could just integrate that information, and also I guess to Ray's credit, that when I came on set, he wasn't like, "Hey man, what's up? Yep, yeah. So this is my set, and don't mess it up." There was none of that attitude. It was just open and friendly, and hey, come play with us. So he, then his character, and he lowered his energy to be that of below the XO. So it wasn't a challenge, I guess. And because I played characters akin to Alexander, Superman is incredibly stoic. I hadn't made the connection until I did another interview a couple days ago, and I realized that actually I was subconsciously pulling from Superman's stoicism in many ways, his quiet, his calm, and that was used in Augustine. So I practiced at it.
So, I mean, now that this episode of Quantum Leap is in the can with maybe more episodes to come, maybe, we hope you'll reprise your role or be able to reprise your role. What else is coming up? What else can our fans expect to see in?
I did a romantic comedy last year called Out of Order, which I think hopefully will be coming out sometime this year, probably on VOD or some streaming service if they're able to sell it. It's independent, but it's a very funny. Well, hopefully it's funny. It was fun to shoot, and I played 2 characters in that actually. And it's with Sam Huntington, who played Jimmy Olsen in Superman Returns, and he was also Marcus and Dylan Dog. So this is our 3rd film together, and we're just being kind of silly. It's like Mrs. Doubtfire if Mrs. Doubtfire was, well, I don't turn into a woman, but another version of myself where I put on a costume and there's lawyering involved. I play both sides of the case, becoming the both attorneys, prosecuting and the defending attorney.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think
It's
Albie's
ridiculous.
antennas just went up because he's our resident rom-com nerd. He loves every
okay.
rom-com.
So I'll be checking that out, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for indulging me on, as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a Superman fan. So it's, it's nice to be able to speak to someone who, came back and sort of embodied the legacy that Christopher Reeve gave us when building the character. Yeah. And I know that was a very conscious decision on the part of Bryan Singer when you guys were making that film. So, I mean, were there any anecdotes from that set that you can recall? I know it was so many years ago, and this is just me indulging myself. Thanks guys. Thanks Quantum Leap fans for putting up with me, but I have you here now. I gotta be a little bit more of a Superman geek. I'm sorry.
I think we have a Venn diagram in our fandom, don't worry.
Yes, very much. I mean, the cross sections everywhere. I can just be a fan of one of these genre things.
So with that legacy in mind, how did that affect how you approached your version of Superman? Were you beholden to what you saw Chris do when he created the character? Was that a discussion that you guys had on set about capturing or trying to recapture the feel of the Donner films? How did that manifest itself when you guys were making returns?
It was made clear to me very early on from Bryan that we were doing basically a loose sequel to Superman the movie, and because of that, bringing in the energy, Chris's energy, was part of the job. I was never asked to watch Chris, to replicate his movements, to be a carbon copy of him. I was never asked to do that, and I didn't watch the movie after the casting process because I knew it so well. When I read for Bryan and Roger Resendin, the casting director, they had there was scenes from Superman the movie. I think it was just one scene. I think it's the pit, the first time Clark and Lois meet in the bullpen, what it's called, glass doors closing off this thing, and it was the Clark scene that Bryan reflected back to me was why I was meeting with him. That's what grabbed his attention, and thought maybe I could do this job because my Superman needed to work. I was always more in tune with Clark. Clark lives with it. Parts of Clark live inside me, so that was easy for me to bring out and to embody. And that is also, here we go, connecting the dots. And that is also because Chris is my Superman. The energy of his Clark matches my energy as a person to a large degree. So had I been asked to play a different version of Superman, I think there was always going to be that element of Chris's Superman, because that Superman, that core, that hope. He always had that charm and hope, and that's the key into Superman is hope, is the unwavering hope. I mean, maybe you waver a little bit because that's interesting, but obviously he did in moments throughout his film series, but he always comes back to hope, and so that's what I carried through in my performance. And of course I did the glasses and and a little bit of those things, funny moments and Easter eggs, iconic moments. But I really worked to make Clark not fumbling. He was just excited about interacting with people, because he didn't get an opportunity to do that, really. Superman, you don't. And so Clark was like, hey, people, hey, oh, this is cool. And then, so he wasn't like always putting on being clumsy. It just came out of him playing the role of Clark Kent, a version of himself. That makes sense.
No, it does. And that's one of my favorite aspects of the character, is that dichotomy between Superman and Clark. And I always find myself more interested in Clark, to be honest with you, because is it just Cal putting on an act? Is it commentary on humanity? Or is he just so aw shucks Kansas farm boy at heart that's the real him? So yeah, I have a whole headcanon with Superman.
they're all him. They are all parts of him. Maybe he's amping up one part and dampening another, but they're all aspects of him. We all have many aspects of ourselves. Like I said, when I'm out in public, I can step into more of a Superman tone and everything, and my whole presence can shift. But I'm not always Superman, and being always Superman-like energy is like, it's not as fun as being Clark energy sometimes, So I don't think we are all any one thing at any one time, even Superman or Kal-El.
Well, again, thank you to my co-hosts and to our listeners for indulging me in my Superman fanboyisms. I guess we can just maybe bring it back to Quantum Leap before we let you go, or any messages out there. Any messages out there for the Leapers? Anything that you want to say to our listeners, to the fans of Quantum Leap?
Thanks for watching the show and being fans, spreading the words, watching cool genre that's like positive and helping the world. I hope you enjoy the episode. And I guess I'd just say one other thing for everyone listening, because it's coming to me that I've been to a lot of conventions, comic book conventions, and meet a lot of people, and now as I put another genre role in my resume, it attracts even more, a broader fan base. A common theme, I think, for people who enjoy these shows is that we feel kind of marginalize ourselves and feel like nerds or geeks. And I think that's a disservice. This is a PSA, I guess I'm doing a PSA. It's a disservice to the person and also to the creative work, because what sci-fi and fantasy does, what these genre projects can do, is shape the future. We have to imagine the future before we can create it. So all these outlandish big ideas are really informing where we're going, can inform where we're going as humans and on Earth. And I think that's really cool. And also, like, everybody is a nerd and a geek about something. Some people are geeks and nerds about fantasy football, and shoes, and hair and makeup. So everybody has their geekdom. And most of them also watch these shows. They just are too afraid to reach out and find community. And I think one of the amazing things that these genre shows do is create community. And I think that's just so exciting and so awesome. And you guys are helping, help create community and connect us all and show us that we're all, we all really want the same thing, which is joy, love, and acceptance, and health, and that we can all get along. I didn't wrap that up as well as I wanted to, but Anyway, don't devalue yourselves for liking. If you are, just love the things you love freely.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note for us to end on. So, Brandon, thank you very much for joining us on the Quantum Leap podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Last night I was telling my friend Sarah that I was going to talk to Superman today, and she texted back, literally, this is what she texted. Have a good time. Don't fangirl too hard. I think I fangirled too hard.
Yeah, you didn't get that text, did you?
The perfect amount.
I kind of went overboard there on the Superman stuff. I kind of went over but I'm just geeking out. And thank you, Serenity. And Brandon, even he came to all of our defenses as geeks and nerds at the very end there. So
I love that man. I've never seen any interviews with him. I didn't know what he was like as a person, but having taken part in that interview, I love him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrific times here on the Quantum Leap podcast. Thank you, Matt, for arranging that. We just keep getting them. We just
Always
keep getting them. And just keep moving forward. Thank you, Brandon, so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for the wonderful words for the Quantum Leap fans, and thank you for indulging my love of Superman. I am in your debt, sir. Brandon isn't the only bright light that we have to talk about here, because we have a new patron. Everybody, let's give it up for Mr. Harold Sullivan. Woo! Harold,
yay, Harold.
Thank you so much for supporting us. Not only is Harold a new Patreon supporter, he has joined us at the $20 producer level, which means that he will get his name read in the closing credits with a special thanks on every show from here on out. He will also be interviewed by me for an Oh Boy segment, kind of like what you heard with me and Albie in a couple of shows ago. He will become a part of the Quantum Leap podcast book club and get his own QLP bookmark as a member of that. And he gets access to all of our bonus content. Right now, there's around 26 or 27 hours and counting of bonus content available for Patreon subscribers at $5 and above. So thank you so much, Harold Sullivan, for your patronage and for supporting the show. Speaking of patrons, we got some feedback from another patron, a longtime patron since we started the reboot series. Her name is Katie Hogan. And Katie writes, "Hi, QLP crew. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed your recent episode revisiting Kamikaze Kid. It was wonderful to hear you all talk about the classic show again. Your love for the OG really comes through. It reminds me of just how special the first Quantum Leap was and why they say it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice."
Allison's critiques of the new series are completely valid and mirror my own feelings. You're not being negative, you're being honest, and I appreciate that the podcast is not afraid to share their opinions, good or bad, about the new series. They're always given with the best intentions for the show and QL's legacy. I've tried my best to give the new show a chance, but it's just not gelling with the original as much as I'd hoped. They've changed too much of what I understood the QL universe to be.
I fully agree with Allison. The new show is trying so hard to be its own thing that it's starting to feel like they are no longer in the same universe. Name-dropping Sam, Al, and Ziggy isn't enough connectivity to call this a sequel or to keep an original QL fan like me coming back.
What the producers and writers need to do is hire the QLP crew as consultants, and maybe they could hit a happy medium that draws new audiences, but doesn't disappoint the original fandom. Whether I'm a fan of the new show or not, I still listen to the podcast without fail every week. Keep up the good work. I'm going to cross my fingers that NBC hires you all soon. Kate.
I'll just point out I'm currently out of work, so I have free time. Just putting it out there.
I could start a day job.
I mean, I got plenty of work to do, but yeah, I'd
I'll
jump
just
on
point
that
out
train,
I've got
right?
lots of story ideas.
I think Matt is qualified.
Sorry, I got lots of story ideas, just no writing ability. Someone write them down for me.
Matt's very qualified to be a creative consultant when it comes to the history of Quantum Leap and the universe.
You are too kind.
I know Katie was just joking about us being hired to recommend things to them, but I think it's there's a dangerous part of fandom when fans think they have ownership of a property. It's very important to remember that these artists are making the art that they want to make, and it's our it's our part to enjoy it. Yes, we are critics, so we critique it. But if we don't like it, that's fine. If we love it, that's fine too. But that shouldn't change the art that they want to make. I think it's important to remember who's making the art and who's talking about the art. I don't mind talking about the art, but I would never want to be in a position to influence what they want to do. It's my choice to watch every week or not, and I'm going to choose to tune in every week.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point. Your previous fandom doesn't obligate you to like this show. I mean, obviously, we've been dealing with that on this podcast directly. But at the same time, if you don't like the show, it doesn't take away the original. The original is still there, and we're still talking about the original, and it's in our DNA to love the original. But what's great about this is the fact that it sparks conversation too. And I've said this before, I think to my wife, I might have said it on mic too, but at the end of the day, I think that all art is just a conversation. And that's what art is there for. It's to stir an emotion and to spark a conversation. And thank God we have podcasting. Thank GTF Dubs that we got these mics and we can all have the conversation and participate as we like. And critiques are fairly valid, as she said. I mean, we've said this for weeks running. Allison's critiques are right on with a lot of people's thoughts out there that are listening. And I, for one, am just for honesty. And a conversation is nothing. It's not genuine if it's not honest. So I feel like all points of view are valid as long as we can do it in a tone of respect and, knowing that everybody has a different feeling and respecting that as well. So thank you, Katie, for bringing it up. We will be doing a lot more content on the original series as soon as season 1 ends. Do we know when the hiatus is over? Do we have a season 2 premiere date yet?
We do not yet.
It's probably going to be sometime in September, though, right? So this is going to take us in through, I guess, the end of April, right? And maybe into the beginning week of May. And then we're going to have months and months of hiatus that we'll be able to just dive right back into Sam and Al and everything that we love. So that is very exciting to me. And if you out there would like to be like Katie, there are many ways that you can reach us here at the Quantum Leap Podcast. You can send us a letter or your manifesto critiquing the new show at P.O. Box 542, Bayport, New York, 11705. You can get us by phone at 707-847-6682. You can email us at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Quantum Leap Podcast. You can also hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Quantum Leap Pod. And you can watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Quantum Leap Podcast. And you can always go that extra mile and support us on Patreon, just like Mr. Harold Sullivan has done at patreon.com/Quantum Leap Podcast. Just remember that we may use your response on an upcoming episode of the Quantum Leap Podcast. And listen, you guys have listened to this. Now you can go watch the video version over on the YouTube channel, the aforementioned YouTube channel. Albie, this is the Quantum Leap Podcast, Quantum Leap Aftershow now. I'm always confused as to what we're naming this.
I always try to add a couple more words on each time. But yes, currently it's the Quantum Leap Podcast, Quantum Leap Aftershow.
Electric Boogaloo.
Or sometimes it's the Quantum Leap Podcast Way After Show, depending.
Yeah. So this is our first crossover. Hope it's the first of many that we do. I feel like we should maybe do one of these each season.
Sounds good.
Right?
I like
just so that we can keep the connective tissue between our universes together as well. And hopefully cross promote and get fans, because I feel like the fans of each show are probably pretty separate. So maybe we have more of a merging of our own separate fandoms through things like this too. So that being said, we have more immediate things to come. Matt, why don't you tell us what's coming up next?
And so coming up next week is Ben's song for the defense. When Ben leaps into a harried public defender, he must keep an innocent teenager accused of murder out of prison for life. In an unexpected turn of events, Jen puts her legal expertise to the test as she steps in as the hologram. # Team
More Jen. More Jen.
More Jen. I was so excited when I heard that description that I immediately messaged Nanrissa and said, "Yay, more Jen! I can't wait." She's super excited as well.
You messaged Nanrissa?
Of course, yeah. I slid into her DMs a little bit, and she said to say hello to everybody and thank you for being on Team Jen. So, really excited for that.
So Ben is trying to clear a young man of a murder rap. I already have a pun for this one. This is going to be 12 Angry Bens. On that note, I want to say thank you, Albie. Thank you, Rennie. Thank you, Hayden, for being wonderful guests on the Quantum Leap podcast. It's weird to call you guests since we're all part of the same team, but I've had a blast. This has gone much, much better than I anticipated.
Yeah.
And I want to say this is one of the funnest conversations I've had about the new show, bar none. So thank you all.
This has been a lot of fun.
And we will be back next week with our critique of Ben's Song for the Defense with another guest host. We're lining up several guest hosts to fill in for Allison until she returns. And we've lined up an exciting roster of guest hosts to fill in until Allison returns. You'll be able to find out next week who we're going to bring on the mic. Until that time, I've been Christopher DeFilippis.
And I've been Matt Dale.
I've been Albie, and I would burn the world to save this little girl next to me.
And I've been Serenity.
And I have been the lead singer of Ziggy's Running Slow, Hayden McQueenie.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Quantum Leap podcast, hosted by Allison, Matt, and Chris, with voice talent and contributions from Hayden McQueenie and Zoe Dean. To support the show, please go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. The executive producer of the Quantum Leap podcast is Albert Burdge. Christopher DeFilippis and Hayden McQueenie are the co-executive producers. Special thanks to our producers, Harold Sullivan, Glenda Palma, Chris, aka Brackmang, Mike Covert, Jeff Kiska, Craig Riedler, Cosplay Dad, Charles Allen Gossard, and Morgan Felden. The thoughts expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent those of the Quantum Leap podcast, its partners, or affiliates. The Quantum Leap universe and all it contains is the property of Belisarius Productions and Universal Television. The Quantum Leap podcast is not affiliated with Belisarius Productions or Universal Television, and no copyright infringement is intended. The Quantum Leap podcast is a Barren Space production.